Hello and welcome to Dees Talk. This Dees Talk is going to be a collaboration in between myself and the team behind Find My, which is a short movie that is currently starting production. Today my guests are Chaneil Kular, Ed Whelan and Luke Taylor, who are respectively the actor, writer, director and producer on this project. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
I thought I'd just start off by giving a bit of context to some of Chaneil's career until today and how this led to this collaboration between the three of you. So you've had a lot of success as a part of Sex Education, which has been one of Netflix's biggest global hits, and Accused, which you starred in. Which showed a totally different side. How did these roles shape your growth as an actor?
Well, Sex Education kind of came to me, luckily, when I first started acting. So I think it was like a great learning process for me, just in terms of getting familiar behind the camera, getting comfortable as well. And also just, it was such a ensemble piece of so many great actors that it was just great to learn off of them. And I think I was in quite a privileged position that I was new to the industry, to the profession, and also I think the success of the show wasn't in any jeopardy whether I failed or succeeded in
because there was so much carrying it anyway.
I think so, yeah, just because everyone in it was so talented, so it was like the perfect opportunity for me to just learn without as much pressure or anything.
As the main star, it was like a team effort much
yeah
more,
whereas
sure.
with Accused, it was a case of it being like a majority one-man film, so there was a lot more pressure in terms of kind of completely letting go of any inhibitions and just forcibly having to lock in, kind of delve deep into the script in like ways that I wouldn't have to before, because the director, Phil Barantini, he worked in like ways that kind of focused a lot on improv and workshopping scenes, so you really had to be present and in the moment in ways that I don't think I had to before. Like with Sex Ed, it was a case of I had like a smaller supporting role, so it's just, you come on, do your lines, know where you're at. Whereas with Accused, when you're in every single scene and you're not shooting in chronological order, you need to actively make sure you're aware of like where is my character at emotionally, where are we at in the story. So that was something new for me as well. It was also like, the material was really dark and it was juicy as well in like an actor's sense. So I was doing a lot of emotions that I never had to portray before. So that was something different. So I
remember watching it in myself.
Yeah.
I felt like I was watching it with my wife and we were stressed for you watching the whole movie. It was very intense, and we were really in the scenes with you, and that must have been, it's a very intense movie to watch because you're being chased and
it was something that the script, like I feel like once it gets going, that film, it just doesn't stop, and
it just escalates and escalates.
And that was actually the thing that I was worried about the most. Like initially, I think when I was reading the script, it was like a case of the stakes are high, and then suddenly they get higher and higher and higher, and it's like, how do I display like the fear, the anxiety, like in a way that this new circumstance that's now elevated my situation has forced me to be like even more scared, if you know what I mean.
And then how does that affect you in your day-to-day life when you're going on set and getting into those like fear mode for so many hours a day, or did it start to like come into your dreams or anything like that?
I think I actually did have a dream when I was doing it that the script had completely changed. So I think just coming into something like that was it was scary for sure, but I think, if we're talking about like growth, like you said, Sex Ed was like almost like a learning process, and then Accused was a case of just sending me to a different level, because now I think it's helped me become so much more confident in my own acting abilities. Like when I was reading the script, and when I read like other scripts as well that come my way, things that normally would scare me now I think excite me, whereas before, like, because
it's like a challenge.
I know I can do it a little bit. But it was very stressful, especially when like you're carrying most of it on your own, and with that film as well, there wasn't like a crazy amount of dialogue either, so it relied a lot on like meticulous facial emotions and stuff like that.
And again, there was both in that and your other short movie which you did, Ryder. There's this element of kind of racial undertones. Like, how did that affect you in any way? But did you feel like in your everyday life? Do you ever feel any of those tensions?
I think, in all honesty, I think I'm very fortunate that I haven't really experienced like anything like that. But that's not to say that it doesn't exist and that people go through that. I think Accused was interesting to me because I think it stands up today as still being so relevant in terms of like misinformation being spread online, or like the fear of like mob mentality coming for you almost. Like, obviously in this instance it was a case of like people thinking you committed a crime, but I think nowadays there's so many people, like I feel like everyone's biggest fear is like getting cancelled online or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So I think I was able to relate to it in that sense, and that being like a real fear that people might have
things
nowadays,
could just go viral and get out of hand online.
Whereas Ryder, I think it was interesting because, you know, my grandparents like emigrated over here, and
from where were they from?
They were from Punjab, in India, and you know they suffered a lot.
All four of them?
Yeah, all four of them. And they suffered like a lot of racism coming in at the time, and even my parents growing up as well. So, but I feel like Ryder was interesting in that sense of, I felt quite privileged to be able to tell a story of like, you know, an Indian immigrant coming over. But I think what was nice about it was that I think sometimes when you think about like immigrant stories, you don't always think about new immigrant stories, if that makes sense. Like I feel like when we see stories being told, it's like a small act or something like that, where it kind of tells the past. And this was quite nice in telling like a kind of like a newer immigrant story, which is really interesting.
Which there's quite a lot still happening, right? A lot of immigrants coming over, and you know, that's interesting. So you've all worked together previously on this project Ryder. How did that come about?
Yeah, so that film came about, kind of by chance in a lot of ways. I was walking to work one day, and a woman fell in front of me, and she was wearing like this bright orange backpack. And I looked around, and there were like 4 riders all laughing at her. And I was like, oh, this is a community that doesn't just exist, you know, as everyone interacts with them. It's just like someone who comes to your door. It was like a real like eye through the curtain.
So they were laughing like, with her as
friends.
You fell over.
Yeah, and it struck me as well that not only was there like, you know, there was this culture there. There was also, you know, the fact that the bag was so heavy that it made her fall over. And it made me realise how demanding this job is. And I think that kind of happened and kind of went into my brain. And then I saw a rider on FaceTime with his family along the Thames, like right on Embankment, a couple of weeks later. And that actually features in the film. And a few other things like that started happening, and I think I kind of started going down the rabbit hole of research, and I spent like 3 or 4 months just researching.
Like who are the riders?
Yeah, who are riders? Like what kind of issues are they facing? Like there's a subreddit called Ruse where riders talk about the best way to like, you know, work out their day and places to avoid, and you know, talk about like rate increases or rate decreases. And like last year there was like a unionization on Valentine's Day where like a few thousand riders went on strike, and that's all because of like the fact that they're able to communicate on platforms like this. So you know, I basically had those like little trinkets of moments, and then kind of a big area of research, and I think I just kind of felt like from my perspective, you know, my kind of way into it was like, I'm not from London. I moved here to pursue a job in the film industry, which is its own kind of economy and has its own quirks. And, you know, I moved here, you know, I moved here and had to like find my place as well.
So you were an outsider.
Yeah, and I think like I then started to think of it as like, okay, my way into this is, the like outsider thing, and looking at London as a place where you are like coming to try and set up a life and trying like carving out like some space. And I think that I saw that space when I saw that girl fall over. I saw that space had been created, and kind of wanting to be as honest as possible about the stories. I brought all of that research together and the first-hand experiences, like both the Ryder, like the backpack tumble and the phone call on the Thames are in the short film.
Right.
And then, there were no real spoilers, but in the attack sequence that was based on like a BBC News report, and it was like traced step by step of how that attack went down and why it went down, understanding, like trying to just create the most authentic experience possible, while also I didn't want it to be like overly apologetic. I wanted it to still have like some character complications and some big filmic moments that didn't make it feel like, a small matter, something that actually does deserve like a mainstream audience that, can grab people and doesn't have to be like fly on the wall and kind of low key. It can actually be a story that deserves to occupy the big screen.
Sure.
And so, kind of bringing that research and those inspirations together, I wrote a film that I think had an interesting character in it, and had a journey that was very new and of our time, and presented challenges that I feel like everyone can grapple with. But also, the main thing is that you get the sense of how hard the job is. You get a sense of how antagonistic London can be, and you also understand that when you're ordering things on Deliveroo or Uber Eats or whatever platform you're ordering from, that actually you are impacting the direction of someone's day and their life, and that can take them down a back alley where they end up getting their bike stolen.
Right.
And
so we should always tip.
You should always, I mean, like it's really, because that, the risks involved in it are quite high. Even outside of malicious thugs, like riding in London is dangerous.
Yeah.
Like cars don't respect riders. Sure. And also, when you're under a pressure of delivering for money, the more you deliver, the more money you make. And so you have this really dangerous combination of like speed and dangerous roads. Yeah. And it just makes for a really harsh working environment.
And how did your working relationship with Chaneil and Luke begin?
Yeah, so kind of two very different stories, but
right.
Chaneil came through casting. I think Chaneil read this. I don't want to speak on Chaneil's behalf, but Chaneil read the script, and I think, I don't know,
I thought the script was great. I mean, whenever I want to do a project, it's pretty much always down to great writing. I think that's the foundation for any good project. And I thought Ed's script was great.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for people who don't know, how does that start? Like, you've come the idea, some woman falls on you, write a script, then what happens? Then you put it out, you speak to a casting agent, and then they send it out to a bunch of actors, and then you get feedback. Is that how it works?
That's pretty much right. It. Yeah, I think like casting director is one of the first people that comes on board. Right. They tend to come on board around the same time as funding, so they're in the early stages, and they will pick out people that they think are good, and then they'll also do like a general call, and agents will pick those up if they have talent that's kind of suitable for that role. Right. And then talent, I mean, Chaneil's got way more experience with this than me, but talent then self-tape, and they have to do that from home now. So
that's part of you received it, then you have to film it on your iPhone and tripod, send it in.
Yeah.
Send in like a reading or something. Yeah. Is that what you did?
Yeah, essentially. You do like a self-tape. send it off, and then you guys, I guess, on the other side, just watch the tapes, choose who you want to call back, and then through that, like, you know, whether there's any more process of like elimination or different rounds, that's up to you guys really, and how you guys want to cast your project, basically.
Yeah, I think it was like we had like a long list, so that's what I will see, of like 60 people for the lead role, and then you call back probably about 8 to 10. And yeah, it's really tough, like, you know, you feel for, because the quality of tapes was actually really, really high. Right. You know, it was the first short I'd made with a casting director. I kind of thought I'd just be grateful if anyone did it.
How long is each audition tape?
So I do quite long ones, because I in this particular instance I wanted to hear about background, and I wanted to hear about life story, as well as reads for kind of 2 scenes. So each one was probably about 6 or 7 minutes. Okay. And you know, it's quite brutal on the other side, because you're watching like what determines the difference between a 10 and 11. Like, sorry, the 10th person you're gonna audition, and the 11th person you're not gonna get the audition. Like, it gets really tricky, especially when you know how much time goes into it, and they're putting a lot on the line. But yeah, Chaneil stood out, and then like I think the sad thing about self-tapes is like it's not till you see people in person that you really realise, and like, you know, Chaneil in person was just like so incredible to watch. Like, held the room, and you just would never get that from a self-tape. You can't judge that.
No, you need to see them in person.
And that's the hard thing.
The charisma.
But that's kind of where our relationship started, and then we kind of have worked well since. We developed the role for Indra around Chaneil and his family background, so that, you know, he felt confident in the role, and I also felt like we were doing something that was. So
in the movie, authentic. Is it Punjabi, like?
Yeah, background? I think it's the characters of a Punjabi background.
You speak some language.
Hindi, I think.
Hindi, right?
Yeah, but that was, I think it was, although I can't speak Hindi and Punjabi are quite similar, but I think Geda, who plays my wife, was a Hindi speaker, so then we kind of just found like a mutual thing. And then plus, I think Hindi is the national language in India anyway, so it's still authentic in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Gena, who plays Sarusha, I'm not sure when she moved over, but she was born in New Delhi. And so we had, like, she can speak it, and translated the phone calls, so I would just send her lines, and she would just come back with.
And she's only appears on the screen of the phone.
Yeah. But she has a really big presence in the film.
She's there in the background the whole time.
And that was a really great process working with her as well, to shape that character. But yeah, and then Luke is kind of a longer term story of we met at uni. I was making a no budget student feature film because I was overconfident and wrote something and thought I won't do a short film.
So you were at the same uni?
Yeah.
Right.
It was funny. It's funny, so I thought I was going for a job interview, and I turned up for it, and it was really official, and I didn't realise he was a fellow student at the time. So I sort of turned up and I was like, this is my big shot, this is going to be it. I applied to be a focus puller, if I literally like a camera operator on the whole thing. I met with Ed and I was like, wow, and then didn't realise that we were all doing this for the first time together. And you realise the roles of it is a lot down to confidence, you know, and all of a sudden I'm there with a focus wheel trying to figure the whole thing out. But we've worked together throughout the whole process, and then a couple more shorts, music videos after that, obviously Ryder, as a combo, and great to be developing scripts together and doing that as well, which has been fantastic.
That's the best way to do it though, start. You've got to start and actually do real projects.
Yeah.
And then that's how you learn.
A massive testament to Luke was that we had 35 people on that student feature. And you know, we shot it over like 28 days, and they were grueling. Like, filmmaking is actually quite hard, and it's not as exciting as it seems when you're actually in it. Like, there's obviously fantastic moments, but a lot of it is downtime and
there's a lot of standing around.
Exactly. And Luke came along, and he was focus pulling, which is not like it's not.
Is that a specific job?
Yeah.
So there's one guy that just
literally
pulls,
the wheel, pulling focus, making sure that every shot's sharp. So if a camera's moving all over the place, or if it's on a rig, there's some guy there who's literally just training it to keep it in focus the whole time.
So it's not autofocus?
No, not on these kind of cinema lenses. So it's brutal.
But yeah, he did that, and I found that.
And then what happens if you get out of focus?
Oh,
like, where are they?
You get someone
it's all blurred.
It's soft.
But he did that, and he became like a good kind of creative confidant, I suppose. Like, we had a few days where our cinematographer was sick with food poisoning, and so he was off set and Luke stepped up.
Wow.
And
upgrade.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we.
Who poisoned him? What was it?
Yeah, Luke did. He just dropped him.
This is a safe space, right?
And yeah, he kind of basically came on at the start as a focus puller, and by the end he was like marked as one of the producers because he was so essential.
Worked his way up quick.
Yeah.
That was good.
And we've been doing it ever since. And I think what was so exciting, I mean, doing a student feature is one of the best things you can do other than going to film school, but it is a difficult process because no one really knows how to make it work. You kind of got to fake it till you make it. The material, let's be honest, isn't always the best to be working with, but when you grow together and grow in that relationship, you build that kind of trust. And I feel like we're working on scripts now that are just so exciting to be a part of. So
And did the uni give you equipment to use or cheap?
So the uni had some investment from an alumni, made a massive difference. So we had some equipment, and then the director of photography and I started a small business at uni, filming things like this, and doing videography work, and we just never took money out of the company.
Right.
So we just kept it in because we had student loans, so we were like, okay, there's only so much we can spend on beer. And so we left it. We kind of left it in the company, and also we bought an iMac for editing our client work that doubles up as editing narrative stuff.
Yeah.
And so we found this quite nice kind of ecosystem where we were just basically funding our work, and then we did some little tricks with our cinema camera. We shot the film on these Panasonic cinema cameras, and the cinematographer reached out to Panasonic and was like, oh, can we try these cameras for 2 weeks? And then I reached out and was like, could I try the cameras for 2 weeks? With a day overlapping where we had two cameras. And they basically sent one camera to us for free.
And they do that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they still do, but...
Top tip.
Yeah, but...
Don't you have to be someone for that, as an influencer, let me try it out, post it or something?
They bought into the project, right? I think that's kind of what it is. It's an exciting project to be a part of, and I thought we put them to good use.
Right.
That's great.
Cool. And then from there, so you had then you moved from the student projects to Ryder. Right?
Yeah. And there was quite a long time between them. It was 3 years between those two.
With other projects.
No, I mean, so after that, we had COVID, and that we graduated into COVID. And that meant that every job that was out there for being an intern vanished overnight because people didn't want to have to have another person on set when you needed essential people. And I'm not from London as well, and so the money that I put aside to move to London and just try and make it work just got sipped away at being at home.
Right.
It just took quite a while to finally convince a production company to take me on and get some income, and when they did, I became a production assistant, and then finally moved to London in 2020, end of 2021.
It was still COVID, right?
Yeah, I basically moved to London during COVID, and all the money that I'd earned production assisting to that point, and anything I had left over from that company, I put into paying for my rent, and moved down with £170 in my bank account.
Wow.
And I was just because I'd been at home for a year and a half, and I'd been getting the odd job here and there, and it was just not really working. and I was like, I just need to be in London, so I just was like, fuck it, you know, I've got to just try and make it, I've got to push it, I've got to force the issue, you know.
Right.
And I did, and I ended up kind of pursuing production because there was more work in that way.
Right.
And so I produced some commercials for a while, and while I was doing that, kind of built up
with
connections.
A company, right?
Yeah, well, I was a freelancer,
Sure.
so I was going between different companies, and I just at one point was just doing all these jobs and thought.
Did you say you did some music videos?
I did do some music videos, but not for. I did one like 2 years ago, probably when I was writing Ryder, actually. That was for like Fast and Furious 10. That was
really?
quite funny, yeah.
You did some big commercials as well.
I think, you know, I was quite hungry, and I obviously wanted to like be able to afford to live in London as well, so I just like worked.
What kind of stuff?
I did quite big commercial for Swatch, and
Okay.
we shot out in Barcelona, and then we did another one last year in Cape Town. But you know, it really teaches you a lot, actually, because as a producer in commercials, like, you're dealing with, you know, like the Swatch one we did in Cape Town was a big, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of crew, and you know, you learn a lot about yourself and how you manage people, and how you fail to manage people sometimes. Like,
I'm sure,
you know,
every project you must be learning. It's probably good to do a variety of different types of jobs, then you pick up different tips and tricks and from each one and incorporate it into your toolbox as a producer or writer or whatever. And
you also get, like, you know, you get some 50-year-old grip who will tell you exactly what he thinks of you to your face.
Really?
You know, you'll just be able to set yourself on a good time, and some like old school grip will just come up to you and, like, you know, get in your face.
What is that? Because you're young and
a bit, you know, because you're young and like, or they, you know, you're doing something different to how they might have done it, or like, you know, and the tricky thing is in production is that, like, you're the face of bigger, wider issues in the industry. Like, if budgets are being cut everywhere and people are being expected to work longer for, you know, not necessarily low rates, but people are being expected to work longer and they might not have as much work. So at home they've got, you know, greater financial pressures. And you come on set and you're like this young person who's asking them to work for like 12 hours instead of like what should be 11. You know, they'll come up and grumble at you, or, you know, and I think that you become the face of a bigger problem, which is like, it's not us who's making the budget smaller, it's like the agencies and the clients, and also, like, I guess I don't know, I'm not really there to speak about it on like the features side of things, but I hear that features are also getting tighter on budgets, and so like the producer ends up taking a lot of heat for actually bigger problems within the industry. And I think sometimes, like, you can come home and blame yourself for those things.
For not having a big enough budget to keep everyone happy.
And like directors as well, like, they can get mad at you if you've not got all the toys that they want and you can afford, and, you know, you end up in a situation where, like, you have to just like be able to have a thick skin. And I think that, like, I don't think I've got a particularly thick skin yet, but it's definitely thicker than it was 3 years ago.
So that gave you insight into the producer role. But then on Ryder, you were the writer and director, so you probably had more empathy for what he was.
But I think it's lovely working with a director who has a producer's mindset. I think it's really useful where we can approach things quite rationally and make compromises where we need to for it. So I think our working relationship is a little bit unusual in the producer-director relationship, because Ed does approach things with a producer's mindset in that way, and I can also come things a bit more creatively as well than you sometimes get from a producer. So for us, it works really, really well. And as a producer, it's actually really useful to have someone on side.
Right.
You also
and you get better working with each other over and over multiple projects.
Right. I think the biggest sensibility is, like, I think we know now what's important to us when we're making these projects, and where we think the money is worth going to make them happen, and it all comes back to maximising what you can get in front of the camera and getting the right people against the project, and I think we have a good chemistry for that.
And I think one of the best things that I think, like, you know, if my life is starting to move away from commercials, one of the things I look back on it very fondly for is the relationships that I've built there, and how that's
sure.
like, you know, the people that are going to work on Find My in particular are top quality emerging crew who I've met through commercials, and they might owe me a favor or two from like a nice job that we've worked on, or they might just like me and, you know, want to work on the project. But you know, it's kind of it's put me in the industry in quite a central position where, like, you know, you're the person with the phone numbers and you can like ring people up, and you know, I think that's...
So who is it that's normally pulling together everybody? Is it the producer or the director or combo?
It's a mix of both, yeah. So producers, some people say it's the CEO of a project in a sense for that, because you're essentially the person coordinating the talent, the budget, the scripts, and making it all sort of fit together in a sense. But directors will often have the relationships you need to pull on in what we need. So Ed's got some fantastic people we're pulling on for Find My, which is great, and it means that we can establish a really exciting project from that script, because it's based on the people you have. So in the day, we all have contact books we can put on. It's the biggest thing you have in our arsenal.
So like, besides you three, is there a lot that have come from Ryder to Find My, or you're planning on?
Yeah, there's some overlap, and then there's also there's going to be some new faces. I think like we had such a fantastic crew on Ryder. But then, you know, there are some people who I feel like, you know, going to be a next step up for me, and people who like I've wanted to work with before, but maybe I didn't have a film to show them in the last one. And you know, like, we're on Find My going to have an editor, which we didn't have on Ryder, which is a really big.
You didn't have an editor?
No,
So you edited it.
Right. Yeah. And that was solely because, you know, to get the investment of someone to edit a short film when you haven't edited something else, like, they need to really believe in you on an unbelievable level, because editing is like the most time-consuming part of the process.
Right.
And they need to give up like usually a weekend, or they need to like forego paid work to work on the film. And I just didn't want to. I had lots of friends who had editors who, you know, they would only get to see their cut once a month because the editor would get tied up with other things. And I just didn't want that frustration. I was like, I'd rather just have complete control and accept some of the losses that come with that, you know, the objectivity that you get from an editor. Okay, you lose that. But
so it's good to have someone outside to look at it with fresh eyes.
Exactly.
And then they just cut it how they want.
And also it's another voice, you know, like it's another voice in the process. So you end up with someone who challenges you, but also might do things that you never thought of. You know, they'll be bringing something to the ideas of the film that makes it different and hopefully elevates it.
And the pacing and all that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And they're cutting it to the music and everything, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah. Well, I always do respect someone that's written, directed, and then cut it as well. Then it's like, you know, I always think of Louis C.K. has done quite a lot of that in some of his productions, and he's like written it, directed, acted, and then edited it as well. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like full package from one guy. So what makes your collaboration work?
Between I think that Luke has an uncanny ability to say quite harsh things with a smile on his face.
I was going to say honesty.
And I think that, like, you know, I all directors are usually trying to push to get their way, and can be like quite, you know, they can get their back up against a wall quite easily with the wrong tone. Like, directors can concede on things. But
is that pushback financially, like?
No, creatively.
No, even creatively.
Creatively, you know, like an idea might be bad, but because of the way that you tell a director that it's bad, they get defensive and actually double down on it.
Sure.
And
it's a battle of wills.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that. And Luke is very good at, like, you know, being a bit of a litmus test, I guess. Like, he can just, if he says it's bad, it probably is bad. And if he says it's good, then it's probably good. Except sometimes if he says it's bad and I just really disagree, like I'll know that it probably, like, actually it's probably something that I want to fight for.
It's
like,
a way of testing it, really. Yeah,
it's a good way of testing it.
It's tough because it does, if you've come up with the idea and you like it and then other people are kind of pushing it back, it can feel like a rejection of yourself. You get emotionally attached to your idea that you birthed or whatever.
That's what's so exciting about a film, right? Because you kind of want a bit of a rocket ship together, right? You're going in one direction and you're going to get this thing made, and it's always been in service of the project itself.
What's best for the project.
Exactly.
Best ideas should always rise up, take away the ego if you can.
Not all directors see that, right? Some directors will approach and go, this is about realising my vision and what I need out of it, but this is in service of the story. And it's even things like, so we used to sit in editing sessions for hours together, right? And we'd watch a scene and then we just feel like something was wrong. And we just sit there and rewatch literally frames at a time over and over again and have to adjust it a tiny amount, and then all of a sudden it feels right. There's no real emotion in that.
Find a sweet spot.
It's just right for the project. And
so would that happen when you work with even if you had an external editor? Are you like in the room with him
I think we're gonna have to be.
I mean, well, I think there's, with an editor, you want to give them space to have their voice. You don't want to micromanage them from the get-go. Like,
but you give some direction.
I mean, normally, as I say, like, this will be my first time working with an editor, but as I understand it, like, the editor will do an assembly, and then the director will make selects from performances. So like they might like just line up the takes and the shots that they think flow well, and then the editor will have, like, depending on who they are, then they'll have like different takes stacked above, so that if you didn't like a performance, you could just alternate them. And then once the director's selected their favourite performances, if you imagine for a film, like, take 1 in this shot is favourite, take 3 in the next one, they basically, like, condense
they stack them so that you can just choose easily, like in Premiere or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you've made your performance select, then they can crunch it down and get into rhythm and flair and flow and all of these things that they want to do and add music in. And so you'd kind of go in, make your selects with them, and then leave them to go away and edit it further, and then you come in and do like a fine cut and work on adding other things, or maybe you didn't like that take after all and it doesn't work. And that's actually, like, often during that phase where restructuring can happen. Like, let's say a scene isn't working here, you might put it over there.
And how many takes would you typically do?
It really depends. On a performance shot, like, I very rarely will go above 7. I think, like, after that
gets tired.
It gets tired, and I feel like often you've exhausted the ways that you want to go. I think, like, I tend to get to a place where I'm happy with the performance, and then I'll do one that is a little bit alternative and could potentially work in the story if I took, like, a different avenue leading into the scene, or like I want a different out at the end of the scene. Like, let's do one that's aggravated at the end of the scene instead of melancholic. You might try and switch up the tone a little bit.
Little final notes, yeah.
Yeah, and just so you've got that, if you needed it in the edit, you're like, oh, actually, we do need one that's maybe more.
Where does the music come in? Do you cut scenes to the music?
Yeah.
That's always a big.
I'm very big on music and film. I find it the most emotive part of the viewing experience. When the dialogue stops and, like, the pictures just start taking over and the music starts to swell, that's when, like, if I'm guilty of, like, second screening. I think we all are, and, like, that's, like, the point where, like, actually your phone, like, dips and you're, like, stuck into it. And like, I think that those moments are the most emotive and evocative.
Absolutely.
And so
you could have the same scene cut to 2 different musics.
Yeah.
It would just be a completely different feel. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, the tempo tracks go in very, very early, and they stay there until Sam, the composer, comes in and
just does his absolute masterwork. Yeah.
Oh, so it was all original score.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no like brought in tunes.
We've got we have a collaboration with a composer who I met on the student feature film, so he made like 45 minutes of original music for that film.
Wow.
At uni, and he went on to the National Film School he's now working on loads of great things, but I keep calling him back, and he keeps coming back. Whether he does, he probably can't say no at this point. Me and him, we have a really good working relationship. He pushes things and I try and push him, and I think that's the best.
Does it get weird because you must watch the movie so many times over?
Yeah.
In a way, by the time it's finished, you've almost like it's hard to like imagine what it must be like to watch it with fresh eyes. Like
that's where the editor comes in, and also what's what I'm looking for? Just screenings to other people, test screenings. Yeah.
And then you watch their reaction.
And they can tell you if a film is moving too fast or if they're not understanding a beat or something, and that's really useful. But it definitely gets to a point
some fresh eyes on it.
And you also always have like some things that you wish you did differently, and you're sat there and you're just having to like watch it over and over again.
It's never perfect. At some point. You can always improve.
But it is funny because with Ryder in particular, we had quite a long edit process, but in a good way, where you think the film is done and you can kind of revisit it after being sitting in a drawer for a couple of months, and you're like, let's look at this a whole new way, and basically restructured the film in that way, and that can sometimes work. But the biggest litmus paper test for me was when we actually screened Ryder for the first time, and like I'd seen it so many times objectively, I barely watched that film. We were watching the audience and seeing what people were thinking, and it's a really special experience seeing people watch something you've made like that. It's bizarre but amazing.
And seeing them live react. Yeah. So then what did you end up doing with Ryder? You took it to some festivals last year?
Yeah, so it premiered in November at Aesthetica, which is up in York. And it had its like premiere there with loads of other amazing drama shorts. It's continuing its journey now at the moment.
This journey, right?
Yeah, it's just continuing on.
And is the idea to take that to make it into a feature length?
It is. We've written a feature length. It's kind of it's in a nice place at the moment, pending a bit more development. But we're quite excited by it. It's quite a big expansion on the ideas that are within it. But maybe we can talk about that one.
Sure.
When it's
further up. But so now you're really focusing on Find My. And, do you want to tell me about how that project came together again?
Yeah. So that project is something that's quite personal to me. So in the sense that Ryder was personal in it being about an outsider's experience of London, this film is very personal in about the final message that it has about parenthood and childhood and the way that we view our parents, where our parents view us, and the kind of habits and behaviours that we pass between us. And that's been a really big part of my life. I think everyone's relationships with their parents are a huge part of their lives. And
so would you say this is based on your relationship with your father or your mother, or both?
Yeah, it's with my father, yeah.
Right.
And it's based on it, but it's repackaged in a very modern storyline.
Yeah.
Like as much as it's about those themes, like you always want the story to feel not so heavy-handed, and
sure.
It's about this young dad who has his phone stolen when he's out on a play date with his son, so it's very contemporary.
Sure.
And and also he's this kind of fading movie star, even though he's 30. He had success in his teens as kind of a big teen actor, and he's already on the decline, and he's like struggling with his ideas of masculinity, how he fits into like the modern social media landscape and the kind of casting landscape that exists. And it's an interesting clash of worlds where you've got like his dad, who might have some older views on the world, or might see his acting performances as something that are forever and he should never let go of how great they are. But on the same note, he's opening up his Instagram account, and maybe like his follower count is like diminishing, or like he's
getting
just
unfollowed.
Or he's like there's stuff like that I think ties it quite nicely into contemporary narrative, and then allows it to kind of its most sincere moments pick on and unpack what it means to be like the dad or the granddad or the son in this.
Because he's both dad and son in it. So, right.
He's in that kind of push and pull where he's not sure whether to be more like his father or, you know, totally different, or like, or even like the parts that he's been playing in his films, you know, up to that point where he's like this action hero. Like, should he be that, or should he just, you know, admit some of his flaws and not be this kind of strong macho man? You know, there's lots of stuff in there that I hope audiences, whoever they are, can understand and relate
Lots
to.
of different kind of analysis of various aspects of masculinity, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because like playing a macho role in the movie and all that. Interesting. And what are you playing in this movie?
So in this one, I actually play the thief.
Right.
So it's kind of funny. I feel like in most projects that I've done, something's always happened to me.
You're always getting stuff happening.
It's a revenge story.
But yeah, in this story, I'm the thief, and without giving too much away, it's only like a brief scene within the film, but it's quite an important one, and I think it's one that has a lot of subtext in, and it's kind of like one of the main catalysts that kind of drives the main character to kind of rethink his whole stance on, you know, his approach to fatherhood and who he deems himself as, like whether he's trying to portray who he was in the movies, or like this idea of he's called Milo, so like this idea of like who everyone perceives him as or knows him as, compared to like being more authentic and kind of present in the moment with him and his son.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you're playing a part all the time in a movie, then people get to know you as that.
Yeah.
And then you have to have your own personality outside. Yeah. And like, do you ever experience that as an actor, that you're like sort of putting on other people's skin, other people's roles, and then you're having to switch back into your normal everyday life?
I think it's quite natural sometimes that people will, you know, if that's the only thing people know you for, they might have like a preconceived idea of who you are.
But like, does the personality of who you're acting ever start to bleed into who you are in real life? And
I don't think so. I think I'm always like aware that I'm acting at the same time.
You can switch it on and off.
But I think I'm fortunate enough to be able to like switch off, or not always be, in terms of like my process or whatever, it's always like a case by case situation.
Sure. And
it's to do with the material rather than like, you know, some people might draw on their own personal life experiences and stuff like that, but I think I'm kind of fortunate enough to be able to just separate from that and not.
So you just go into their story.
Yeah, I think so. And just always being aware of like the overall project and like what we're serving, what we're trying to do here, rather than, I don't know, feeling like you are that character in that sense.
Yeah. So where are you right now in the process with the development of Find My?
Well, for us, it's a really exciting period. We're basically at that sort of first hurdle you have after you get a script together and funding together against it. It's essentially the start of pre-production. So we've had a brilliant casting process take place. Got our lead, Jamie Flatters, confirmed, which is really exciting. And now it's basically the rest of the cast need to come together alongside Chaneil as well. So literally while we've been here, we received our first casting tapes, which is very exciting. So we're reviewing this after. And then alongside that, we've been location scouting. So every weekend going all across London, finding various places for the film as well as attaching our head of department as well. So essentially at the moment, it's turning this script into a thing where you have the people attached, the talent, the right crew attached to it, and the locations as well, are sort of the main things we're looking into at the moment.
And how do people commit? Is it a verbal, or is it like a contract? Or
at the start, it's basically just a verbal agreement you come to over email. You offer out rates to people as well from it, and then with certain roles, you do need talent release contracts for that as well. So we'll be working those at the same time. So, but for us, it's a lot of it's pulling on people we know already, people we surround ourselves with day to day and have experience and trust with, and that's building the best possible team possible, basically.
And then is next step table reads, or what do you do? Or do you typically just go straight into the filming? Or
so on the talent side, it will be, I do usually do some rehearsals. And on this film, there's a fight in it, so there'll be some stunt coordination. where the guys work out, how they're gonna fake hit each other. On Ryder we did something similar with Chaneil, and then on the kind of the outside the talent world of pre-production, there's a lot of technical stuff going on. So there's like location scouts, there's storyboarding, there's what camera you're going to shoot on, what lenses you're going to shoot on. There's art boards, there's colour palettes that you're designing throughout the film. You're doing wardrobe discussions, like the whole, like everything that you see in front of camera is basically being pieced together now. Right. And the more deliberate that you can be, the better, because then on the day, if there's a spanner in the works, you've still got like a really solid foundation of decisions that you've made in the months leading up to it. And it also allows you space for some improvisation.
And what do you use to collaborate? Is there like some kind of software where it's all like kept? I mean, when you're storyboarding and stuff, is there a physical place where you put it all up and it stays up, or is it like all digital now? Like
it's all digital. So on my iPad, I'll draw on my own storyboards, and these things called mud maps, which is like a floor plan, where you have like X's to signify talent and little squares to signify different camera positions, and that's just done on an app called Procreate, which is a very popular iPad app. And I'll just draw them out and then like turn them into a PDF, and they go on a Google Drive. And the cinematographer is usually the main person who's looking at those, but it's very often on the day. It means that like, when you're going through a scene and you get to the end of it, you can just check that you've got everything. And you might have like a note scribbled next to it that you put down 2 months ago to like make sure you get I don't know, like some inflection when someone picks up a phone or something, to make sure that you've got like a movement edit out of the shot. And it just, that kind of stuff on the day, those little details, it's good to have that recall of like these little notes that you put in.
Because I would have imagined like back in the day it was all big studios and they had a physical room and stuff. Now it's all, especially with COVID, remote work, and also the nature of, by the sounds of it, with film, it's a lot of people, kind of freelancers brought together for the project. So where's the home of it? Like, where's the office kind of thing? It must just all be in the cloud, right? And then you just set up meetings
effectively
for specific reasons.
I think the main, like, there's an advantage that it doesn't cost you anything to have a space, but also like the moment that I could afford to have a space, I would have one, because it'd be lovely to put all the boards up and have like stills of characters in costume, and you can get like a very clear and kind of holistic overview of what the film's going to look like. Like I remember
when it's all out on a big wall, like those kind of crime detectives, exactly. They put it all together, and then you get a different feel than when it's on a small screen and it's just you're flipping through pages.
I mean, on Ryder we had so many locations that about 2 months before we shot, I printed out stills from all of them and put them on the floor in the order that they were happening in the film. Just because there's quite a clear descent in the film. Like the character falls down kind of a rabbit hole, so to speak. And so I wanted it to feel like that. And so there were some locations that I was like, that's too nice to have there. And you end up, because you can put it all out on the floor, but that's still like
then you get like a holistic top-down macro view of it all.
I mean that used up like more than my little box room could handle. Like I was basically like wall to wall in there, like looking down at it. But it was that's quite useful. And then like art boards tend to be on Google Slides, so it's collaborative. So you can just drop stills in of things that you like, and color palettes that you think are good for different scenes. So a lot of it is remote, with the odd meeting.
And you're doing that, and then in parallel you're raising finance to make it all happen. So you're like attaching people, and you're trying to sort of magic it all together by like getting the little ingredients. And then I guess once you attach certain names, like Chaneil's being on board must be like attractive to the like at some point to get to raise the finance, and Jamie on board as well now must have been quite a big coup for you guys as well.
I mean, to get talent of that quality is like yeah, I mean, it's amazing because it means that when you're shooting, you're not having to work to get to like a baseline. Like
Sure.
they're already well beyond that baseline, so you're just able to just play. Like, you know, you can run a scene and, you know, it's already going to be good out the box.
Everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and then you can fine tune. You're not having to just like try to get it to a place where it's like functional. Like you're actually so much further beyond that, and that takes a big pressure off production. But also, you know, both Chaneil and Jamie have, you know, they've had really established careers already, and so to have people like that working on shorts, I think, is quite a nice thing for the shorts world, which has always been looked at, I think, with somewhat of a prejudice. But you can make really powerful stories in shorts, and also I feel like it is a really good place for actors to show a massive range. Like, you know, I feel in Ryder we saw a lot from Chaneil in terms of like seeing you in a different role and seeing like a huge range over 14.5 minutes, and I think like that must be really good for actors to be able to show to directors who are looking at them for other films, because they know that you can do some lighter scenes.
It's like a montage of emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Happy, sad,
Yeah.
sexual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of it squeezed in.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then how does the managing the budget go? Because I guess that must be an absolute nightmare, and just like this stretching thing all the time. It's
all about being creative sometimes in the solutions you do find. I mean, the biggest thing you can build up as an early filmmaker is a network of people you can fall back on essentially when you need them for this, because a lot of what we do...
To work for cheaper than...
Yeah, well, we still want to pay good rates, but it's not going to be at commercial rates at the same time. And when you're hiring equipment, it's not going to be at full rates for that as well. So,
Are there like fixed rates for stuff in the industry?
In the industry there is, for the shorts world's separate, right? It's outside of it, and obviously the more you can pay, the better people you can bring on. But at the end of the day, you're kind of just asking people for their time and trust on these kind of projects, and you always want to try and bring people that's going to elevate whatever project you're going to do with that. So the budget side of things, it's a lot of, again, building that network, pulling that network, thinking what creative strings can we pull to make this thing stretch and feel more expensive than it is. And ultimately your goal as a shorts producer is to make it feel, people think your budget's much more than it actually was in the end of the day, and push it that way.
I mean, I guess these days with the tech moving so fast as well, I'm guessing you could, with AI and things, make things look much more expensive than they are, or even include scenes. Have you guys looked at any of that AI
potentially
integration?
I think for us, we're very a boots on the ground kind of filmmaking team. We enjoy being on location. We enjoy the human aspects and the industry of crafting things together. I mean, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think there's something really special in that. So yeah, maybe that's how we'll really push things and push budgets even further from that perspective. But for now, it's essentially the old human task of what mates you have, what can you pull on, and what can you really make work.
And like, people are happy to do that for the credit or for the joy of working on the project.
I mean,
at a sort of reduced rate, just because they like you.
I always have this crazy thing, which is like, why do we do what we do sometimes? Because it's not often paid in the same way that a lot of careers are, and you have to work incredibly hard in these roles. But I think there is something weirdly spiritual about being on set. Is the first thing I think some people find. There's also just the fact that you build really good relationships through shorts. So if you want to get to know a team really well, a DOP really wants to bed in with a new camera team really well, that's a great way of doing it. So people often do it for that ways, but really it's the creative balance you have to the commercial world, which we do day in, day out, really.
So do you think that for young up-and-coming actors, producers, directors, that's always the best way? Start with shorts?
Yeah.
You kind of go through the whole cycle
of
making a movie, and then from that, it's the same on a feature length, but just bigger budget and takes longer.
It's the same principles, but at the same time, you have to scale up. And not all shorts scale in the same way. So I think it's good to have a nice balance of experience between your commercial world and your shorts world, because the shorts world is nice. It's great to work on, but they don't come around hugely often. So it's how to make that work. And essentially with most filmmaking, it's doing the day job for as long as possible until the passion can become the life, essentially.
Sure.
Yeah.
and hopefully this seed of the short can turn into a feature length. That's always the idea, right?
Yeah.
So with Find My now, you're kind of proving the concept, I guess, right? With like, do shorts make money, or they're just the sort of opportunity to display your work?
Yeah, they're kind of an investment vehicle in talent, if that makes sense. So they're more a some of them are proof of concept shorts. So a Whiplash is a great example where you make a short that is so resonating and so successful that it can turn into a feature at some point. But not all shorts are designed that way. Other of them are more portfolio based, as Ed's talked about as well. So really, when you're investing in a short, you're kind of investing in either an idea or the director themselves and progressing from there.
Right. So financially, they tend to make a loss, or
They tend not to be commercial vehicles in this way.
right?
Yeah,
It's more like an investment of the collaborative team that can then work together on
exactly.
something else, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like investing
like
in,
you guys are.
Yeah, it's like investing in the spiritual sibling of a company that's, it's like an indirect kind of thing.
Right. Interesting. So, how's the timeline for Find My looking?
We're very excitedly hoping to shoot at the end of May, start of June. So we're a couple of months out now, which is great. So it's going to be a full-on, very intense pre-production process to get there. I think our biggest thing at the moment is, locking down funding, locking down talent, and so another massive thing for us. And then I think that will ramp up more and more with a lot more technical details as we get closer to it at the end. And then we'll go into a couple of months of post-production afterwards. So we're kind of 4 to 6 months out, I'd say, from where we actually have a finished project, but we'll have to see.
And the idea is to have it all based in the UK, London?
All in London, yeah.
Right.
All in London for this. It's very much a London-bedded shoot, London-bedded crew as well, but we hope this idea can travel. And, with the festival run at the back end of it as well, hoping to do the London festivals, potentially some regional festivals like Flatback, for instance. We had an amazing time at Estetica, so we'd love to do that as well, going back up to York.
What happens at a festival?
It's just the most inspiring creative people together for a week, and just sitting there and getting, I'm not going to lie, humbled a little bit when you see other people, the quality of some of the shorts out there. But also you have some of the most inspiring conversations between people going, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm working on, we can bring this together.
Lots of business cards being handed
Lots of business cards, lots of portfolios, lots of films. You can sit in a cinema for 6 hours a day, or you can sit in a cafe, just meet people 6 hours a day. It's how you want to make it work. And we'd love to do some US festivals as well. That's where it's a completely different world out there.
Is the dream always to break the US, would you say?
Yeah, it feels like the way you have to go. As much as the UK industry is a fantastic place with really talented people, it feels like to break the ambition that you need to do, the US kind of matches it. There's an entrepreneurialism that goes with that as part of it. But the funny thing is we have some of the best creators in the world here. It's just not always matching it with that sort of investment ambition that they have in the US.
Right. And is the idea to sort of get signed into Netflix, or?
It's the feature, really. It's the feature. That's the ambition.
Yeah.
Because now there's all these new players coming in, all these streaming giants like Amazon and Apple and Netflix coming in. How's that affected things?
I feel like Ollie would be better placed to answer this one on another podcast.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Going a bit off your guys' areas of expertise. Yeah. So, Chaneil, what do you have coming up, and what's your ambitions? Where do you see yourself going? Staying independent, or do you see yourself becoming a Marvel superhero?
I mean, I'd take it if it came my way, to be honest. But no, in all seriousness, I think you've been really fortunate enough to work with really talented people all around on bigger projects or smaller scale projects, whether it's a short. And I think nowadays the industry is so hard to navigate, and like we were saying, it's really hard to kind of gather any kind of semblance of support, especially if you're making like a short that's not necessarily going to make any money and things like that. And I think there's, in times like you were just saying, there's so many different big players at hand. Sometimes there can be a lot of politics sometimes about who do we get to get bums on seats in order to make profits and stuff like that. And there could be, I don't know, there's just a lot of factors out there that can mean that, if you do have the talent, you still might not get the job, really. And I guess while I still want to be open to, see what projects come my way, I don't necessarily want to be like a slave to whatever's always out there. So I think what's really nice and what, you know, I feel really grateful for is meeting people like Ed and Luke on projects, coming together and kind of forging your own destiny, as well as instead of just kind of waiting around all the time, because who knows when that or if that project will come your way, really.
Sure. And do you end up turning down stuff?
I have turned down stuff. Sometimes, like, you know, people need to live at the same time, really. And there can be benefits of, you know, okay, not necessarily being as passionate about a project, but for instance, you know, if you take a certain project on, that might help fund like a different passionate project that you might do, and kind of, you know, you can take it and reinvest it in a different aspect, and you're still kind of building your career in that sense, and seeing like benefits of it. But yeah, I you know, if I'm not passionate about something, and it, like I said, it normally comes down to the writing and things like that, and I won't take on a role for necessarily the sake of taking on a role, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, as you said, most of the roles I've seen you in, you've been getting beaten up and stuff like that. Do you see yourself going into comedy or anything else like that, or do you like this kind of thriller drama type?
I think initially, I think what was really nice about taking certain roles where, you know, I was going through it.
Stress, yeah.
It's like just to display my range as an actor. I think sometimes you can really be hard done by in terms of the opportunities that are out there. So when they are presented to you, I think you should just take them with both hands, as long as you get to show that range that we were talking about. That's the biggest thing you want to do as an actor, because, you know, even separately, like I've got friends who are directors, and they normally go like, the one thing I think about when I'm trying to cast someone, like tapes aside, is like, I think about their work, or like, you know, if they are a known actor, like, have they proven that they're able to do this? And then that brings them up in like an initial conversation about who we can cast in like a project. But I think in terms of my own personal ambition, like I've always wanted to have a varied career. So I think whether that's comedy or drama or like sci-fi or horror, whatever it is, I just want to be able to say that I've kind of done it all. And it doesn't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to be like a big role each time. Like obviously, you know, it's nice to have like a lead role, like a strong supporting role, but even if it's like a smaller role in what I still think is going to be like a really good project,
sure,
I'd still take it.
Always as an actor, but like, do you see yourself going into other aspects of the film industry, like producing and directing?
I think
writing?
So. Like even with Find My, like Luke and Ed were really happy to have me on board, like on a producing aspect of it, and I think it's just important to just learn how things work.
Because learn by doing best.
Yeah, 100%. And like I was saying, I think it's really good to just have that in your toolkit. So, you know, if it ever came to it, like, you know, if you wrote your own material, at least you know the steps and have the connections to be like, well, how can I make this like a real thing? Rather than just being like, you know, my only sole purpose is, or the only thing like I'm necessarily capable of doing is acting. So I kind of have to wait for these opportunities to come to me rather than actively making them happen myself, if that makes sense.
You can lead a project and then put yourself in it.
Essentially.
Make your own one.
Yeah.
And how many producers can you have on a project, and how does that work?
It's the murky world of the credit list. Can mean many different things. You know, you often go on these features and there's 15 execs and producers and different types. I mean, every producer serves a different purpose, right? And actually it's just down to what they bring to a project. You have some that are much closer, like a line producer, that are doing the day in, day out, the scheduling and whatever we need to do from there and getting locations on board, rather than you have more of like an exec or a creative producer, which are focused on, you know, bringing the talent together, bringing the project together and packaging it in that way. And then you have exec producers that are much more focused on finance and connection from that way as well. And everyone is a vital part in that process, because otherwise it's just a script with a lot of ambition but no connection to make it happen, or a lot of connection and no script. And
is there like a head producer that manages all the other producers?
I'd keep an eye at the order of the credits when you watch a film. That's a telling thing.
Whoever comes first.
It's a telling thing.
Is there like a word for the top producer?
We're just all producers.
Okay. Even. Okay, great. Good to know. Yeah, so I'm just going to go into a little quick fire round. What one word would you describe the UK indie film industry right now?
Tough.
Tough. Yeah. I'd say agile. Yeah.
Okay. Probably related because it's tough. You need to be
agile.
Yeah,
but that creates opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to think on your feet. Yeah.
I think probably like brave in a way.
Brave.
Like people who are in it need to be brave. Yeah.
It's not easy. Yeah. Thanks for coming down today, guys. I look forward to catching up with you all on the next phase and hopefully hear more updates from the Find My project.
So exciting. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.